Hello, my wonderful viewers, and welcome to another episode of Betty Adams Overanalyzes. Today, we're going to do an analysis of something I noticed in Kaiju number 8 about Kafka with this latest chapter, Chapter 75. There will be minor spoilers up through Chapter 75 in this, so if you don't want any of those, you can go check out the links below my video to get a copy of my book, Humans Are Weird. I have the data, or Humans Are Weird. We took a vote. But let's talk about what Kafka wants, what he thinks he wants, and why the series is lingering on this. From the very beginning of this show, we've had Kafka's motivations. It's nothing huge, it's just a fairly common motivation. He wants to protect the people he cares about. This gets further developed, and we find out that it wasn't just a one-time thing. Kafka was just the kind of older brother figure who took care of the people around him. He was a very nurturing character who took the responsibilities of being in charge of anyone very seriously. We see this through Mina's flashbacks, through Kafka's flashbacks, and he decides to be a defense force officer so he can better protect the people around him, to keep them from crying in his childish expression of his motivations. Then the whole thing with the little guy happens. He now has these Kaiju number 8 powers, and he keeps saying that he wants to be valued for himself, for what he, Kafka, brings to the table, not just for Kaiju number 8. And when he has been captured by the Defense Force, when he was in that cell for 5 days with nothing to do but push-ups, that's kind of what was going on in his head. When the Director General discussed this situation with Kafka and Captain Narumi, those were Kafka's thoughts. He doesn't want to be used as a weapon as Kaiju number 8. He wants to be valued to the Defense Force. Now, can he be valuable to the Defense Force? We don't actually know what his drawn power is. We don't know what his power level is, because he was tested for that power level after he'd had a Kaiju in him, and that's definitely going to mess up the system. So we know that with the little guy Kaiju in him, with the Kaiju number 8 contamination, he can draw 1%. Could he draw more? And that without it, remember, he couldn't draw any. He could only draw 0% at the very beginning. But he trained that up to 1%. So he went from literally nothing to something through hard work. I'm reminded of a meme I saw going around the internet about a clarinet player who was the worst in class, and the teachers trained him really, really hard, and he could barely get any of the higher notes out of his musical instrument. And they worked on it really, really hard, and they taught him all these extra techniques, trying to get him something, and he finally started to be able to get a few high notes with these techniques. Then it was discovered later that the clarinet itself was broken, and once all the valves were replaced, he could play the clarinet better than anybody because he was trained so hard on the technique. And this is the same concept of weight training. You make it harder for yourself to move, and then once you remove the weights or whatever's encumbering you, your skill level shoots right up. Fairly common concept in anime and manga, so I'm thinking we might see that. So maybe after they manage to extract the little guy Kaiju from Kafka, he'll be able to compete on the level with maybe a platoon leader or a captain. Maybe he'll be able to draw out 20, 30, 40%. Who knows? But for now, he can only draw out that 1%. That does allow him to be reasonably functional on the battlefield, but what Kafka really brings to the table, his real skill set, that it was actually what got him hired as an officer. What made him survive the application process was Hoshina's suspicions, but what got him promoted to being an actual officer instead of just a cadet was his ability to be out on the battlefield as a soldier, but thinking like a tactician. Kafka is the ultimate union of the controllers with all their information and knowledge back at the base, and the Defense Force officer out in the field. And that goes back to that scene in Chapter 13, where he not only discovers where the core is in the fungal kaiju that they're fighting, but he discovers the reproductive organs as well, saving a lot of lives. Because everybody would have come out of their shelters, would have been going about their daily lives when that second wave of kaiju broke out. That's the second time that Kafka foiled a major plan of Kaiju number 9's, and the Kaiju number 9 didn't even know it then. But why am I talking about this today? Why am I bringing this up now? in chapter 13, you get this image of Kafka standing up out of the white dead corpse of a kaiju, holding, in one hand he's holding up the core, and in another hand he's kind of wiping his forehead while holding his utility knife, and Kafka's relaying this information to Vice Captain Hoshina. Kafka is in that moment probably being the second most useful person on the battlefield. The most useful person being Mina with her giant cannon, of course, but that was Kafka preventing Kaiju number 9 from succeeding. And in that moment, he's focused on what he can do, focused on his skills. He's not trying to be out competing with the other officers. He's giving everything he has to the battle, and he's making a huge contribution. Then in chapter 75, we get an image that mirrors that. You have Kafka standing in the middle of a corpse, and you can tell that he had just been down on his hands and knees helping the other Defense Force officers who are doing the rearguard action, sorting through the kaiju corpses, doing that thing. But instead of having his mind and hands on the task, he's turning around and looking at the giant-sized kaiju, and he's going to platoon leader Shinomiya and asking to be put on the front lines. He says, I've never fought a kaiju that big before, but I'll make it work. So he's trying to be that front-line field officer that Mina or Kokoru or Narumi is. But that's still not who he is, even though he has Kaiju number 8. And Shinomi goes into, no, you're our trump card. We're not playing you for these big, small fry. We're holding you back until we locate Kaiju number 9, basically. Because if Kafka transforms into Kaiju number 8 before Kaiju number 9 shows up, that will actually summon Kaiju number 9, and they don't want to make the battle situation any worse. They want to make the move. They want to find where Kaiju number 9's main body is and attack that main body. So Shinomi has all these reasons to tell him to turn around and basically go back to what he was doing. And this is what really drew my attention was the visual comparison. Kafka in the middle of the battlefield with giant battles going on all around him, standing in the middle of that corpse. And in the first scene, he's applying himself wholly to the corpse, ignoring the battle that's going on around him, and he makes a super important discovery. In this scene, he's not giving his entire mind and attention to the corpse. He's paying attention to the battle around him, and it doesn't look like he's discovered anything. That kind of raises the question, did he miss something important in the corpse of that kaiju? These are specially modified kaiju that are different from anything the Defense Force has seen before. There's so much Kafka could be learning from this. Is this going to be Kafka's great failure, that he was so focused on using his Kaiju number 8 powers that he lost track of how he's actually valuable to the Defense Force? The irony being that he wanted to be valuable to he kept saying he wanted to be valuable to the Defense Force for his own capabilities, and here in this scene he's ignoring his own true value to the Defense Force in exchange for offering the value of Kaiju number 8 as a weapon, which also connects back to the scenes with Captain Narumi, Mina Ashiro, and Vice Captain Hoshina, where they each said, back off, don't use Kaiju number 8, it's killing you, we'll take care of this. And I'm fascinated where this is going to go. In a simpler manga, either Kafka would be right to use Kaiju number 8, or the others would be right to tell him to back off. But I really think that Matsumoto is writing this story at a level of complexity where you have a situation and no one knows what is the best, what is the optimal thing to do. Because should Kafka be using Kaiju number 8's power? Should he be focusing on dedicating his mind and analytical powers to the Defense Force? What would be the best thing? Who's right here? Is there any way to tell who's right until after the fact through 2020 hindsight? We don't know. But what I am pretty sure of is that Matsumoto deliberately mirrored the chapter 13 scene here in chapter 75, and that Kafka, for some reason, it's important that we recall that Kafka's greatest contribution to the Defense Force always has been his ability behind the front lines, analyzing the situation and explaining what's going on and taking care of people, supporting people. Kafka is a support role character, despite the Kaiju number 8 thing. And in this scene, he is paying less attention to his support role and trying to get out there in the battlefield. I'm wondering if there's going to be consequences for that, if Matsumoto's just showing character growth here. What do you think? Are there going to be serious consequences for the Defense Force and the citizens because Kafka wasn't paying attention here? Is that a lesson that Kafka has to learn? Or is this Matsumoto just showing Kafka's shifting perspective as it really internalizes this awesome power he has as Kaiju number 8? Tell me, I'd really love to hear your thoughts below in the comments. Tell me what you think, and then hit that like and subscribe button. Go check out the links below the video to get yourself a copy of my book, Humans Are Weird, We Took a Vote, available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kobo by Rakuten, pretty much everywhere books are sold. Peace out, my wonderful viewers.